After they sit
front on cushions. I was talking with this boy about freedom, said Prabhupada. So I say, there is no freedom for us. We are always dependent. What is your opinion about it? One of the professors said he agreed, and Prabhupada continued speaking. He talked with the professors for more than an hour. Near the end, Upendra's 3-year-old son, Somya, walked up to Prabhupada from the back of the room. Prabhupada gave him some money that was on the desk, and the boy ran back to his mother and gave her the money. Yes, when I was young, Prabhupada reminisced, if I got money, I would take it to my mother. But then when I would become angry at her, I would demand it back. Sometimes I would steal money from my mother's purse and go watch Charlie Chaplin movies. His favorite scene was a film called Hard Times, he said, when Charlie Chaplin sat down at a table with a knife and fork to eat a boot. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So it is our great privilege today to hear from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 7, the activities of King Bharat. And we're on text 5. Okay. Icha Bhagavatam Yagya Krato Rupan Kratubir Uchavachai Shradayatri Aghotra Dashaponamasa Chatamasya Pashu Samanam Prakriti Vikritribir Anusvanam Chatohotra Vidina. Responsibly, please. Ijay, worshipped. Cha, also. Bhagavatam, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yagyakrato Rupam, having the form of sacrifices without animals and sacrifices with animals. Kratubi, by such sacrifices. Uchavachai, very great and very small. Shradaya, with faith. Ahrita, being performed. Agnihotra, of the Agnihotra Yajna. Dasha, of the Dasha Yajna. Purnamasa, of the Purnamasa Yajna. Chatomasya, of the Chatomasya Yajna. Pashu Somanam, of the Yajna with animals and the Yajna with Somaras. Prakriti, by full performances. Vikriti, and by partial performances. Anusavanam, almost always. Chatuhotra Vidina, by the regulative principles of sacrifice directed by 4 kinds of priests. Translation: with great faith, King Bharat performed various kinds of sacrifice. He performed the sacrifices known as Agnihotra, Dasha, Purnamasa, Chatamasya, Pashu Yajna, wherein a horse is sacrificed, and Soma Yajna, wherein a kind of beverage is offered. Sometimes these sacrifices were performed completely and sometimes partially. In any case, in all the sacrifices, the regulations of Chatahotra were strictly followed. In this way, Bharat Maharaj worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Animals, like hogs and cows, were offered in sacrifice to test the proper execution of the sacrifice. Otherwise, there was no purpose in killing the animal. Actually, the animal was offered in the sacrificial fire to get a rejuvenated life. Generally, an old animal was sacrificed in the fire, and it would come out again in a youthful body. Some of the rituals, however, did not require animal sacrifice. In the present age, animal sacrifices are forbidden. As stated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Ashvamedam Gavalambam Samyasam Pala Paitrikam Devarena Sutopatim Kalo Pancha Vivajaye. In this age of Kali, 5 acts are forbidden: the offering of a horse in sacrifice, the offering of a cow in sacrifice, the acceptance of the order of Sannyas, the offering of oblations of flesh to the forefathers, and a man's begetting children in his brother's wife. C.C. Adilila 17:164. Such sacrifices are impossible in this age due to the scarcity of expert Brahmins or Ritvija who are able to take the responsibility. In the absence of these, the Sankirtan Yoga is recommended. Yogyai Sankirtana Prayo Yajanti Hi Samedasha. Bhagavatam 11:5-32. After all, sacrifices are executed to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yogiratat Kamano. Which activities should be carried out for the Supreme Lord's pleasure? Such activities should be carried out for the Supreme Lord's pleasure. In this age of Kali, the Supreme Lord, in his incarnation of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, should be worshipped with his associates by performance of Sankirtan Yogya, the congregational chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. This process is accepted by intelligent men. Yogyai Sankirtana Praya Yajanti Hi Samedasha. The word Samedasha refers to intelligent men who possess very good brain substance. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So Srila Prabhupada makes the point in the purport that in the age that we're living in, Kali Yuga, this age, the best yogya is the Sankirtan yogya, and Hisamedasha, those who have, certainly those who have good intelligence, that's the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, they will engage in the Sankirtan yogya. So good intelligence is an interesting commodity. It's something that a person has only if he possesses very good brain substance. So they've been doing tests on people's brains for quite some time now, and it's interesting, the whole concept of the brain. Anyway, how the brain, nobody really knows quite how the brain works. They kind of poke it and see what happens. But they have taken people's brains out to have a look at them afterwards, just to see what's going on. And people that have died from alcoholic poisoning, the alcohol goes up the capillaries into the brain, and the alcohol just eats into the brain, leaves tiny little holes inside the brain. But the brain is the one organ in the body that doesn't feel any pain. So when they're taking the alcohol, they're just, I don't know, feeling a little dizzy or a little disorientated. But what's actually happening is they're dissolving their brain. So then you end up with not very good brain substance. And there's other things as well which don't have a good effect upon the brain. Eating food in the mode of ignorance is not very helpful. Even eating food in the mode of passion is not very helpful. And so Bhagavad Gita is explaining how we can make the brain substance better by eating better, by having better habits, and even by how we think. We can think in better ways. We can think in more positive ways, in more compassionate ways. We can take attitude and we can turn it into gratitude. And that helps actually to all the different parts of the body are related to our consciousness, not just the brain. And of course, the real consciousness is situated in the heart. It's sitting on the life air, on the prana, and that's where the soul resides. And then the soul uses the organs of the body, such as the nose and eyes and ears and the brain for different departments. But it's quite possible for the soul to think, smell, taste, touch, and see independently of all the different organs that are there in the body. So the soul sees through the eyes. The eyes don't see. The eyes are seen through. The brain doesn't think. The soul thinks through the brain. Just like Ravan had 10 heads, and each head had a different predominant function. And there was one head that he had which just dealt with travel. So whenever he was thinking of going somewhere, he'd check with his travel head, and the travel head would be, well, it's maybe not such a good time of the year, and flights are expensive right now on Ryanair, whatever it is. So he had different departmental heads dealing with different aspects. And then he had his real head. His real head was the only head that wanted to steal Sita. The other 9 heads were all saying this is not a good idea. They were all like that. And his real head was going like that. There's a bit of an argument going on. So there are good ways to think, positive ways to think, and to organize the mind. The mind, when you're sitting down to chant japa, see the mind as a herd of cows, and you're trying to get all those cows into the field with Krishna. And some of the cows are wandering off to think about what you did when you were a child, or to worry about how you're going to pay your gas bill this week. And you're saying to the cows, no, come back. We're going into this field over here. We're going to be with Krishna this morning. No, come here. And you're rounding all the cows up. And you don't want your thoughts wandering away. So to do that, you have to have good focus, and you have to have good intelligence, because the intelligence is what is used to keep the mind in order. So the intelligence comes in and says, never mind, we're not thinking about this. No, we're chanting just now. And then the mind becomes happy if it's disciplined. So trying to see what's going on with the brain by just poking around at something inside your skull, you're not going to get very much indication. You're not going to be able to see how the modes of material nature are working. If you want to find out how the mind and the consciousness works, then you have to look at Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and then we get an analytical breakdown of how the senses interact with the material elements, how the mind is affected by the 3 modes of material nature, how the intelligence can be used to elevate the consciousness into a higher level of consciousness. So this is all very scientific. In the 60s, they thought they'd cracked it with the mind problem. They thought you just take this little tab with this unusual substance on, and you swallow it, and that's all your mind problem solved. But unfortunately, when that tab wore off, then back came all their problems, sometimes even more problems than they'd started with. So it's not so cheap and easy that you can just go and buy some chemical, swallow the chemical, and everything's okay. There's an interesting book, actually. Johan Hari has written a bestseller called Lost Connections. And the big illusion of the pharmaceutical industry is that they're telling people, you just take this chemical, it will change the melatonin levels in your brain, and then everything will be fine. In fact, it won't just be fine, you'll be even better than you were before. This will unleash your real potential. And so people take these things, and in fact, exactly the opposite happens. The problem becomes more compounded, the depression becomes more intensified, so they have to keep upping the dosage, and then the suicide rates increase, and so many other bad side effects. So he's analyzing in the book that because we've become disconnected from meaningful work, from deep relationships, and from connection with nature. So if you take somebody out of nature, he doesn't have good relationships, and there's no meaning to what he's doing. And it doesn't matter how many antidepressants he takes, he's going to be miserable. So this is what we're saying. This is what the Bhagavatam is telling us. This is what the Bhagavad Gita is telling us. The Vedic literatures are telling us. Lead a natural life, and lead a life which will be progressively more and more elevated. So that, if you go up to somebody and stop somebody and say, would you like to be a better person by this time next year? And they'll say, hopefully they'll say, yeah, I think I would like to be a better person than I am. And then you ask them, what means will you employ to secure that you become a better person by this time next year? Well, I'll make sure I wash my socks. I'll help old ladies across the road. I won't pick my nose in public. They don't have any real solid program. How are you going to elevate the consciousness? How are you going to change so that this time next year you're less greedy, you're less lusty, you're less angry, you're more compassionate, you're more considerate, you're more sympathetic, you're more empathic. All these really, really wonderful qualities. And we all know if we were more and more like that, we would be more and more happy, more and more satisfied. Well, we become like saintly and pure, then the happier and the more satisfied we feel. We know that because we see those that are more saintly, and the ones who are the most elevated are the ones who blame the least. They asked Mother Teresa, what's wrong with the world? And she said, I'm a sinner. What's wrong with the world? So when people start telling you what's wrong with the world, or what's wrong with this guy, you can say, I know what's wrong. What's wrong is I'm not a pure devotee. That's what's wrong. So yeah, interesting Prabhupada using the phrase very good brain substance, because if you're eating garbage, then it means your brain will be garbage, and it means all the thoughts that you're thinking will be garbage as well. So garbage in, garbage out. We want nice things, then we want nice. There was an amazing doll the other day. I couldn't believe how good it was that Javavasi Prabhu made. It was a highlight of the week. I was thinking, this is amazing to be able to take prasadam, very, very high quality prasadam, and then that goes in and immediately become enlivened and better qualities start to manifest in ourselves. Just by what we eat has such a big effect. And if we're eating junk food, did you know that when a person dies now, it takes them 3 days longer to decompose because there's so much preservative in the food that they're eating, that they stay fresh longer. So what must that be doing to your consciousness? If you stay fresh 3 days longer, what's that doing to your brain? They have a thing inside tins, it's called gender bender. And it's a preservative that stops the food rotting. And that's fine, your baked beans are still fine after 20 years. Only problem is, if you keep eating them, then it changes your gender. So if you're a lady, you start getting a beard. If you're a man, you start getting other parts of the body. So that's called a gender bender. So if you're eating tinned food, and you're eating food with lots of preservatives in it, and you're eating food that's been cooked by people in a very, at least in a very mechanical, materialistic state of mind, then all that energy will go into the body, and then it will affect the brain. The brain is nourished by all the things that are going in, and then the whole consciousness becomes affected by that. So the age we're living in, because Kali Yuga, it is very difficult to, it's forbidden to do a horse sacrifice, do a cow sacrifice, to offer oblations of flesh to the forefathers, to take sannyas, or beget children in his brother's wife. So this is because of the lack of integrity. So the bar has been lowered to a very, very simple a simple thing, which is just to chant the Hare Krishna mantra. And I was just listening to Hamsa Dutta the other day, Memories of Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada said, do you know all the books? Just to convince you to chant Hare Krishna. He said, if you're convinced that you should chant Hare Krishna, he said, you don't need to read the books. He said, they're just to convince you to chant Hare Krishna. So that's the ultimate conclusion, is to be fully convinced that this chanting is all that I need to do, is the highest perfection. And if I do this nicely, then everything else will be achieved. Any questions or comments? Yeah.
Could you explain this principle that Sannyas is totally
Yeah, in Kali Yuga, it's very exceptional for someone to be a sannyasi. So if someone has taken sannyas and is following that standard very nicely, then we should certainly bow down and show more respect, because it's such a difficult thing to do. Srila Prabhupada did make exceptions. He called it battlefield commission. He said he was giving people sannyas that weren't really qualified. But on the battlefield, sometimes you have to just make somebody a lieutenant, even though they've only been in the army for 3 days, but the situation is so desperate. And then we had that nice sannyasi Yadunandan Maharaj come over, and he was doing putting a book together on sannyas, and his conclusion was, don't take sannyas till you're at least 50, 55. So when you're much older and you're more experienced, then it can be allowed an exception, but Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur also said it's not necessary to take sannyas. If you see your home as Krishna's temple and your wife as Krishna's servant, and you're in that consciousness, then there's no need to take that risk. Grihastha ashram is considered safer. Sannyas is also important because they are like the leaders, like the gurus in society. So when a sannyasi comes to give class, everybody wants to come along to hear the class. So people sit up and pay attention because he's made a serious commitment, and so that demands serious attention. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I had an argument a few days ago with some devotees. They were saying, one devotee was saying that in the Ramayana it is mentioned that the Brahmanas, they would eat meat as well. So I don't recall reading that Brahmanas will eat meat. Do you know anything about it?
No, Kshatriyas,
Yeah.
maybe, yeah, but not Brahmins. I've never ever came across any pastimes or stories where a Brahmin ate meat.
Yeah, he quotes some verses from the Ramayana, and it is very clearly stated that they were eating meat.
Oh.
But my question is whether this translation of the Ramayana are bona fide or not.
Oh.
Because it's not, in Krishna made one Ramayana, Bhaktivedanta Swami, and I read those one, and I never came across these quotes.
Sometimes you hear the argument. Do you know what roadkill is?
Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes you hear the argument. Well, one Buddhist was saying to me actually. He says, "Well, I don't eat meat, but if it's there, if it's on the road, then I'll peel it off the tarmac and put it in the frying pan." But even then, even if you don't kill it and it's died because of its own karma, still the substance itself is contaminating to go into the system, to put that blood and flesh into the body will have an immediate. I remember I'd been a devotee for only 2 years, and I went for an operation in Harley Street in London on my sinuses. And when I woke up after the operation, they said it'd be good to have some ice cream because it will help. It was on my throat actually. I had nodules on my throat and they were removed. So I was eating the ice cream, and as I was eating it, it felt like the sensation felt like going down in an elevator. I was like, and by the time I got to the last spoonful, it was kind of like that, you know. And I said, "Can I just have a look at the packet of ice cream?" And sure enough, there was eggs in the ice cream. So it was bad in one sense, but it was really good in another sense because it showed me that it's a scientific, it's a science. If you want to be a Brahmin, Brahmin means one who knows Brahman, then you have to come to the Sudasattva, pure goodness. And these types of things that go into the body, eggs are referred to as liquid flesh, aren't they? The Egyptians used to refer to them as liquid flesh. Menstrual period of a chicken, so not a very auspicious substance to put inside the body. So immediately the consciousness was dulled, you know. I could feel myself going down. So certainly me would have been even. There's one story, as Noah Srila Prabhupada was sick and he was offered chicken soup, and as soon as he spat it out, he was actually physically sick. So once your body, because it takes 7 years for the body to reconstitute. So if you've been vegetarian for over 7 years, and then you put some meat in, it's like the body's like, oh, you know, it's not going to go down very well.
Yeah, it happened the same to me when one time I came to my parents' house and I opened the fridge and I started to drink water, but it was not water, it was wine. Because there was no light on the fridge, I couldn't tell the difference. And I felt like burning, like literally like drinking fire. And I was thinking before I was drinking wine like if it was water, but now the body had changed.
Yeah, the Red Indians used to call it firewater. Well, they used to call whiskey firewater. They were always doing little deals with the cowboys for some firewater. So yeah, that shows Krishna consciousness is working, that you become averse, things that you were attached to and you found pleasurable. Now they're causing sensations which are unpleasant. And as you go on, then it should become more and more refined, you know. I mean, there's so little information we have in the West about consciousness, what it actually is, how it works, you know. How is it produced in the first place? Where does it come from? You know, is it some electricity that's being generated from the brain? How does it happen? What is it? Krishna explains in the 10th chapter, he says to Arjuna, I am consciousness. I am the consciousness in all living entities. So if people find it hard to believe in God, then by the same logic, it should be hard to believe in themselves, because where did you get the consciousness from? You didn't think yourself into existence. You're just going around thinking and having consciousness. Where did that come from? And if you think about it, that's pretty hard to believe as well. You say, okay, I find it very hard to believe in God. Well, it's very hard to believe in yourself as well. Where did you come from? And where we get a lot of, I mean, it's amazing the way our lives are engineered in Krishna consciousness. We get up early in the morning. I was up this morning at 3:15. So I read first, then I came up after Mangalati, then I chanted, now we're having class. So this is before any activities take place. You get a chance to work on yourself, meditate on some philosophical points, learn some Sanskrit verses, and then chant some mantras, and then discuss philosophy, and then we start the day, you know. So we get a lot more me time. There was one guy, he was a multi-billionaire in America somewhere, and he was so busy doing all the stocks that he had the only chance he got to have something to eat, he'd run down the stairs and grab this salami thing, whatever it is, really like from one of these greasy junk food bars, you know. He'd go over, grab a quick one of them, eat it quick, then run back up the stairs and carry on doing all this stock exchange stuff. And here we have so little facility, but we have all this time suddenly for ourselves, more than all these rich people who are, you know, they're speeding around on jet boats and big cars and flying here and going here and doing this and doing that. But when was the last time they sat down and thought about their existence and the meaning of their lives? We get a chance to do that and to develop our understanding, to contemplate and go deeply into the philosophy, the meaning of our existence, the value. Srila Prabhupada said, if they do not accept that God exists, then all their reasons are meaningless. In other words, if you take God out of the picture, then it means there's no meaning to anything. Everything becomes meaningless. So then you have your choice. Do you want to lead a meaningful life, or do you want to lead a meaningless life? Because what meaning can there be in just coming out of the void, and then in due course going back into the void, and then the interim state in between, coming from nothing and going back to nothing? You have 80, 90 years to try and accumulate as much money as possible, and then disappear again. I mean, on the universal scheme of things, of what significance is that? It's like having seeing a load of ants, and they're running around, and one little ant grabs a grain of sugar, and he's like, "Hey, boy, I've got a grain of sugar," and then he dies after 2 or 3 days, and somebody else gets the grain of sugar, or But for the demigods, they're looking at us. We have such tiny lifespans, just fractions of a second, and we get excited because we get a big house or something, it lasts for just a few years, and then blip, it's gone again, No meaning, so meaningless, really. That's why when the Russian astronauts went up into space and saw the grand scheme of things, when they came back down, they had to have counseling, because it made them see how small they were in the universe. Their planet is just one speck, and there's trillions of specks, and they're one speck on a speck amidst trillions of specks, and then everything's become so meaningless. So we want to possess good brain substance, and we want to be Sumedisha. And so we are chanting, and Sri Ramaraj was just saying in his podcast yesterday that you have to get to the stage of nishta as quickly as possible, because once you're chanting at the stage of nishta, that's when things start to become very colorful and very tasty, very interesting, and you're just about to enter into ruchi, to actually getting a taste. But if you don't get to that stage quick enough, then you could lose heart along the way and become discouraged and think, oh, it's not really working, or I'm not really working, I don't think I can really make it, I'm not cut out for this pure devotional service. And so then we could become discouraged and go away. Once you get to the stage of nishta, then there's no turning back. So we have to get to that stage as quickly as we can. Then our chanting becomes real chanting, actually. Until we're at the stage of nishta, we're not really chanting, we're battling with all the anarthas and being distracted and preoccupied by them.
How to reconcile this thing? You quoted one of the devotees who said that all the books have to convince us to chant, but then you hear the other things, by the acharyas, including in Bhagavatam, here that you cannot come to pure chanting unless you study Srimad Bhagavatam. How to reconcile these things, or Srimad Bhagavatam also comes under chanting.
Yeah, once you come to the pure chanting, so that's why you need to read the books, because that's what Prabhupada was saying. If you could chant purely, if you can chant purely, you don't need to read the books. You see, it's referred to as Vijayavadu Jivanam. Vijayavadu Jivanam. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. And the life of all transcendental knowledge is the internal potency, the Hari Shakti, which is Srimati Radharani. So if you're chanting purely, then that means Radharani will tell you whatever you need to know. She'll tell you. you know, and the pastimes will come in. You'll be seeing the pastimes. If you're chanting purely, the Bhagavatam is explaining what the pastimes are. Vijivada Jivanam, the life of that knowledge is the holy name. So when you chant the holy name, you go into those pastimes, into that lila, guna, lila, vesh, the dress, the qualities, the pastimes, all those counterparts. Atashi Krishna, Namadi, all the things to do with Krishna, Namadi. Sevanmukhi Jivani, Swayam Eva Sparatyuda. Sparat means manifest, Swayam, Krishna's personality. Everything, you get everything. You chant purely, you get Krishna. And Krishna means his pastimes, the philosophy, everything, if you chant purely. So, yeah, we read the Bhagavatam and the Chaitanya Charitamrita and the Bhagavad Gita to bring us to the stage of pure chanting. Of course, when you're chanting purely, you're getting such a taste that you can't resist, even though you don't need to, but you can't resist. Oh, I think I'll just read. But it's not that you needed to read, but you can't resist it. It becomes so attractive, so relishable.
Actually, just reminded me what Shiva Swami says in the Srila Bhakti-Chintanam. He explains, based on the reference to acharyas, that without sambandha jnana, you cannot come to pure chanting.
Yeah.
And there are two ways to get sambandha jnana. I mean, it's just paraphrasing what you said, that kind of reference to what he says in the book. One is pure, very good chanting.
Yeah.
Really get sambandha jnana from that as Vidyavad Jivanam, and another one is Guru and Shastra.
Yeah.
Really get sambandha jnana. But without sambandha jnana, you can't come to pure chanting.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there was a story of a devotee. He was chanting in front of a picture which depicted Lord Chaitanya and his associates, and he was just chanting. He wasn't doing anything particularly different than he normally does. But the next minute, he went inside the picture, and Lord Chaitanya was there, and all his associates were there, and he was there, and then suddenly he came back out again. And so he was running around telling everybody, I was in the picture, I was in the picture, I was in the picture, I was in the picture. And Srila Prabhupada heard about it, and he said, to tell everybody is 10th class. But that's what it is, that's what the chanting is. It opens the door, and you can go in, and you can see everything that's going on, you can find out about everything. Anandam Vadivadhanam Padipanam Panam Vijivada Jivanam Anandam Vadivadhanam. Yeah, so that's the life. And if you have a strong taste for chanting, then your ability to understand the books and decipher the significance of what's being said in the books and why it's being said in the books, why this particular detail is in the books. You start to grasp more the significance of everything that's happening, Like Guru Das was saying, we had a Japa Sangha last night, a few devotees together, and Guru Das was saying what he notices is that when you chant nicely, you have a heightened ability to read and appreciate all the different aspects of devotional service. So the chanting is the empowering element, empowers everything else that we do. All the other angers of the bhakti come from the chanting of Hare Krishna. Shishikar Nitai Maya Pashashiki Jai. And Kadamba Kanal Maharaj just gave a really, really nice little video, and he was saying it's the eternal festival of the holy name. And he said you may be there for just 5 minutes, or for half an hour, or even for an hour or two, and then you may have to go. You may become distracted, or something else comes up. He says, but when you go, when you really absorb, then you enter into the eternal festival of the holy name. So that's what the Hare Krishna isn't so much a mantra. The Hare Krishna is a song of joyous celebration, and that's the eternal festival of the holy name. And Krishna is inviting us in Kali Yuga, just come directly now to Goloka and come and join us. We're having a great festival. Everyone's invited. Just chant Hare Krishna and you can come. You just need one price of faith. And a price of faith appreciates, because that's the nature of appreciation. Appreciation appreciates. However much you appreciate something, it will get better and you'll appreciate it more. And if you appreciate it more, then you can be sure you'll appreciate it even more. Appreciation appreciates, whereas depreciation depreciates. So the more you have a problem with something, that gets worse and worse and worse. So we want to stay proactive and progressive by being always appreciative of everything that's going on, you know. And we should try to be the change that we want to see in others, or try to be the change we want to see in the world. If we see the world as not fair enough, not kind enough, not compassionate enough, then we can try and increase our compassion. Jai. Okay, I'll finish there. Thank you very much. ISKCON Guruvinda ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaura Premanandi, Hari Krishna.